going on, guys? If you're watching this, I hope you had a good new year. In this video, we're going to be making this room out of the Binding of Isaac. We're going to be making this room out of the Binding of Isaac. So if you've been following the series thus far, so far we just have cubes as the walls, right? And obviously we can't use that for our final game. This video is going to be in Blender. It's not going to be in Unity. To make assets for your game, you're going to need to pick a modeling software like Maya or Blender, or if you're making a 2D game, you can use drawings like Sketchbook or something else. Really quickly, if you don't want to make assets, you can actually go to the Unity asset store and they sell assets, and a lot of them are free as well. So if you want, you could go and find some like walls and a floor and stuff like that on the Unity asset store. If you're not artistically inclined, modeling and game development kind of go hand in hand. So if you're a solo dev, if you download assets from the asset store and somebody else has used them, you could have assets that are in someone else's game. So anyway, so you can download Blender from the internet for free, and when you open it, it looks like this. So you want to delete the light and the camera. We're not going to be using those, and then we want to click on this cube, and then on the right here, there's like a wrench looking icon, and we're going to add a modifier. We're just going to type in subdivision surface. So when you add the subdivision surface modifier to your object, you're basically adding more detail to it. So what it does is it subdivides all the vertices inside of your object and it averages it out. So it smooths it out so you can add more detail to your object while retaining the shape of your object. Now it does make this kind of a rounding effect. It uses something called the Catmull-Clark. If you just want to add detail to your object without changing the shape of it, you can click simple and it will subdivide and just add more detail. So if you apply this and you go back into edit mode, you can see that it subdivides it perfectly without actually adding. We do actually want to use Catmull-Clark in this case because we want it to be more rounded. We're going to be turning this into a rock wall. So rock walls are not square, they're rounded, but it doesn't really matter. We're basically just using this to add detail to the mesh. Okay, so then we want to add another modifier, which is going to be the displacement modifier. So basically what this does is it takes all of the vertices and it displaces them a certain amount. So we're going to be using a texture to displace the vertices based on an image. So at the top of the displace modifier, there's a button that says new. This is to create a texture. So after you've created the texture, when you click new, there's like this edit properties button on the right. And this brings you to the actual texture itself. So you can see that it made it a little bit bigger by default. And that's because the texture is completely black right now. The vertices are being moved based on this picture. So since it's black, black is 1 and white is 0. So 0, like if this was a white image, would keep the shape of the current object, and black moves the image. So let's change this to Musgrave. So you can see here, there's a picture on the right side, and then the vertices of our object are moved based on the image. And to demonstrate how this is working, I'm just going to show you on a plane because it's a lot easier to see it on a plane rather than a subdivided cube. So here I have a plane. I've subdivided it the same way that I subdivided the cube, but it's flat. So you'll be able to see exactly what's happening. So we're going to add the same modifiers, and let me just go back to object mode. So you can see right away it moved the entire plane upwards. And if we add a texture, I'm just going to add wood as the texture instead. So if you look at this from a side angle, the parts that are black are raised and the parts that are white are lowered from the bottom. So it started here, right at the origin. So the white parts are all the way at the bottom and the dark parts are all the way at the top. Now, we don't want it to this extent. So what you can do is if you don't want it to be this impactful, and you can choose this color ramp option at the bottom, and where this is white, you can actually just turn it down so that it's closer to gray. And the closer to like halfway point, the closer it'll be to the actual like spot that it started. So if you don't want it to be like down that far as well, instead of doing black, you can bring it up more. So then you get like this wavy kind of thing. This is really useful for so many different things. Like it's not just useful for making a rock wall, but you could see how you could use a picture to make your mesh go into a shape really, really easily. So like for fabric and stuff like that, like this is already fabric-ish, right? Without you just have a picture, and you could also import pictures into this, and you can use any of the pictures that it comes with. Okay, so back on the cube that we were working on, we just want to go into the texture where we had Musgrave, right? So if you go to your modifiers and you click on this little thing to the right of the texture, you can go back into the texture. And we want to change the noise basis from Blender Original to Voronoi F2, F1. So you can already tell by this is like a really cool way of subdividing and changing like the colors or whatever. So if you zoom in on this, so change the size to like 0.75. The black lines are going to be the gaps in the rocks, and like the white areas are going to be like the extruded parts. But the white areas, you can see that there's faint little black lines dividing them as well. And those are going to be like the details on the rocks that make it look really cool. So we don't want it to be like this, obviously. So, okay, so the first thing we need to do is we actually need to turn up the levels viewport. So this is how many subdivisions there are. So don't turn this up too high because your computer will crash. It grows exponentially. So every time you make this go up one, all of the vertices get subdivided. So you could like if you go to 7 or 8 or 9, your computer will probably have a meltdown and Blender will just crash. But anyway, you want to clamp this. Like the colors, go to the colors the same way we did in the plane. Go to clamp, click on color ramp, and we want to make these numbers closer together, okay? So black means it's all the way inwards, like the maximum way in, and white is all the way out. So we want them to be closer together because this is more of like ore or something like that for a game. It's a cool effect, but it's not what we're going for. So if you take the black one, if you as you drag this up, you can see that the middle point is moving outwards, right? So we don't want to go too far because we're going to be bringing the outer points inwards as well. So bring it towards the halfway mark. You can just copy the values if you want. And then the white part, we want to bring this down so it's darker. And like the further you bring it down, the smaller the rocks are going to be. So maybe right about there. Now we want to add a midpoint. So let's change this back a little bit whiter. And we'll change this back a little bit darker so it's more spread apart. And we're just going to press this plus button to add a key in the thing, right? And we want to drag this pretty far to the left. So the further you drag it to the left, the smaller the gap will be in between the rocks. Okay, and we just want to change this value to be higher. Yeah, maybe like that. So this is kind of perfect for a rock wall, right? So this is what we're looking for. So let's go back to the modifier tab. So if we click on the object, we can right click and click shade smooth. That will get rid of some of like the pixelation and the ugly flat faces that just look kind of wrong. And then we want to also add a smooth modifier probably. So just add another modifier. You can just type, if you're using Blender 4, you can type in here. You could get the smooth modifier and just change the repeat to 5. This takes away some of like the blurry kind of stuff that was happening. And we could probably bevel this. No, we're not going to bevel it. Forget it. So then this is really powerful because we have these modifiers on it, our shape is still a cube, okay? So if we edit this shape and we move it like this and we tab back out, you can see that it will actually change like all the rocks and stuff, even though it's like, if you change the shape, it will generate the rocks again based on the shape and the size and stuff like that. So we want to make this into a wall. So if you, I press tab to go into edit mode. And if you press A, you can select all of the vertices, and you can press S and X to scale it on the X axis, and S and Y to scale it, S and Z to scale it on the Z axis. And let's just make it a little bit bigger on the X axis. And then we can press 1 on your keyboard to lock it on the side view. Press G and Z to move it up so that it's at the origin line. So you can see that this has turned this into a circle. We don't want this to be a circle. We want it to be a square. So subdividing, it takes all of the points and it subdivides them, right? So if we add a cut here at the top or at the bottom, it will flatten it because it's going to be subdividing the gap in between these two. So if you press Control R on your keyboard to add a loop cut, the way that we just did, left click to confirm the loop cut, and then you can drag it down or up. So we want to add one near the top and one near the bottom. We also want to add these on the side, add another loop cut and drag it close to this side, and add another loop cut and drag it close to this side. The closer it is to the wall, the flatter the wall will be. So if we tab back out of this, now you can see that all the detail in the middle of the wall is gone. It's like a flat kind of stretched out area. And that's because all of the detail has been, a lot of the detail has been compacted into these small little areas near the edges of the walls, because this gigantic gap in the middle gets subdivided the exact same amount as this square. So every square gets subdivided the same amount because it's exponential, right? So we need to put a bunch of ring cuts in this so that the detail can come back, right? So if you press Control R, we can scroll up our scroll wheel. The more you add of these, the more detail there will be. And you don't want to add too much detail, obviously, because it will lag your game. So we want to do it that way. And we also want to do it this way. So after you're done that, if you tab out, you should be able to see that the detail has come back and you've got this really crispy wall. Now, this has now another problem, that there's way too many triangles in this. The number of vertices and triangles in this is probably well into the millions, and it's going to lag your game. So we need to use something called the Decimate modifier to remove some of the geometry. So to do that, first we need to apply all these modifiers. So if you click on this, to apply all the modifiers at the same time, if you go to the Object tab, you can click Convert to Mesh. So when you do this, if you press Tab, you'll be able to see that there's so many vertices that it looks pitch black. This is way too many vertices for in-game. So we just want to lower this. So if you add a modifier, we're going to add the Decimate modifier. The Decimate modifier just removes geometry, but it tries to keep the shape as best it can. So we're going to change this to maybe 0.02. Let's see how that looks. This might lag your computer really badly, by the way. So while this is loading, you can see at the bottom we're at 1.6 million as the face count. Yeah, so you can see the more you decimate it, the lower detail it will be. Make sure you look at it from a top view though, because in our game we're not going to be able to see the sides of the walls. We're only going to be able to see the tops of the walls. I guess if we walk away from it, you can still see kind of the wall, but the top is the most important. So the next thing we want to do is if we click this drop down, we can click apply on this to actually apply the modifier. And with the modifier applied, if you go back into edit mode, you can see that there's like way less vertices than there were before. And so from the top down view, if you really want to get it a little bit more crispy, like if you want more like cuts, like deepness to this, you could crease in between them. So if you go to the sculpting tab, you don't have to do this, by the way, this looks pretty good the way that it is, but inside of the sculpting tab, there's a draw sharp option right here. And you could, turn the radius down a lot and turn the strength up. So you could technically cut into this and make these more defined. Is that a hole? So also in the sculpting tab, if you go to the draw tool and you hold the shift key, you can smooth out some areas. So in some parts of this, because we're using like texture generation, you can see that like it's overlapping and it kind of looks like shit. So you can fix that just by holding shift and smoothing those parts out. I wouldn't do it too much because you'll take away from the rock effect, but in parts where like it looks like it's kind of broken, like there and there, you might want to just fix it. This might not have happened on yours, but on mine it's pretty bad. So you could just hold shift and you can smooth out the broken parts as best you can. This shouldn't add more geometry. It should just move around the geometry that you already have. So we're kind of making a ridge along the top here by smoothing this. Okay, and like I was saying, you could use the draw sharp tool, or there's also a crease tool somewhere where you see it right here. So you could use the crease tool or the draw sharp tool, and you could cut some of these parts out a little bit deeper if you want to. This just makes like the lines more defined. So like as you run over it, it will just apply to like the areas that are already deepened. But you could, I need to smooth that out more. You could use the draw sharp to deepen some of the holes if you want to. Now, you probably need more geometry to actually deepen the holes. You could technically turn it on Dynatopo if you want to at this point. We're not going to go into that in this video. But yeah, just you can use the smooth tool to kind of smooth out some of the things. And then if you kind of make it too smooth, you could draw sharp to like dent it a little bit so that there's not like huge globs of like smoothed areas. Okay, so let's go back to the layout mode and let's just look down. So this is looking great. This could probably be a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. So after you've applied all the modifiers, it's really, you can't really go back. So if you mess up at this point, if this isn't big enough for you, you can scale it like S and X to make it larger, but it will stretch all of like everything will get stretched if you do that. Anyway, so now we need to duplicate this 4 times. So if you press Shift D on this, you can press Y and move it away from where it started. This is how big the room is going to be. You're going to have to make it the distance that one of these pieces is away from it. So press Shift D again, and you can press RZ90 and press enter and press GY to move it upwards, and then GX to move it over. And then you can click this wall and type GY to move it upwards. So these have to be touching, but they don't need to be like overlapping. they should just be touching. And then you can take this one and press Shift T and then X and move this one over as well. So after you have your 4 walls in the positions that you want, make sure you press 7 to get a top view so that you can see, like, because you can see like this one is a little bit more over and this one needs to be over a little bit more. So make sure you line them up as best you can. And then we're going to add a floor. So just click Shift A and add a plane to your scene. You can press G and Y to move it into the middle of your room and then scale it up so it is filling the floor. Now this is not going to be the final floor that we're using. We're just using this temporarily, okay? So SX to scale it this way and SY to scale it this way, and just make sure it covers everything. But again, like I said, we're going to be doing probably an entire video on the floor, so don't worry about this being perfect. So now we need to cut a hole in each of these where the door is going to go, right? So press Shift A again and add a cube to your scene, and you can press G and Y to move the cube, and we just want to move it kind of close to one of the walls. It doesn't matter which one. So then press G and Z to move it up so that it's coming out of the ground. Make sure it's not intersecting with the ground. Anyway, just press S and Z to scale it up, and G and Z to move it up. And it needs to be about the size of the door that you want. So this doesn't need to be the shape of the door. So if you look at the door picture, hang on, let me open it again. So if you look at the door, so it's kind of angled, right? So like the top part is larger than the bottom part and it's angled outwards, but the hole doesn't need to be angled. Only the door needs to have that. So we'll just press S and Y to scale it this way. So it goes all the way through. G and Y to move it so it's intersecting with this. I think this is a good size. Our doors don't need to be too large. Okay, and I think it might actually be appropriate to bevel the edges. So if you press Tab to go into edit mode on this rectangle, you can press Control B to bevel. And when you drag your mouse away from the center point, you can see that it's adding these little cuts. And we're just going to scroll up our mouse wheel twice so that it's rounded. And then we're going to press Enter to finish that, and press Tab to get out of edit mode. So this is just rounding the edges so that our hole that it gets cut will have round edges instead of like a hard sharp edge. And then we want to click on our rock wall and add the Boolean modifier, and we want to intersect our cube that we just made. So if you do this and it completely deletes it, if you go to the solver options, we can click self intersection. This might really lag your computer, so be prepared for it to have a laggy meltdown a little bit. And then after you're done that, you could just press apply. Okay, so after it's done applying, if you click on the cube, you can delete it from the scene, and you can see that it's cut this nice little hole into our mesh. Yeah, so this is perfect. So this is just like it's like a hole, and then we're going to make a door that's going to go in front of the hole, and then we're going to, at the very back of this, we're going to have like a black cube that doesn't accept light. So it's going to be like a unlit black cube that's going to hide the back, like, so that you can't see through the door. But yeah, I think this turned out really good. So you need to repeat the process on all 4 of the walls. Okay, and now we're going to make this door. So this is one of the more easy parts of this. If you just press Shift A on your keyboard, we're going to add a cube to the scene. Okay, and then just press G and Y because the cube is spawning at the origin. The origin's over here, by the way. So we could have made this room around the origin, and we'll probably move it to around the origin before we export it. So what we'll do is we just press G and Z on the cube to get it just above the ground. And then let's just add the subdivision surface modifier the same way we did before. So subdivision surface, we'll turn it up to 3. And this is going to be the right leg for right now, right? So if we go into edit mode, actually just move it over first. So get it over here and go into edit mode. We'll take the top 4 vertices and we'll press G and Z to move them up. And then we'll take the bottom 4 vertices and just move it. If you can't select the back vertices, you can press Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode, which allows you to select the points at the back. And before we actually move this down, so we want to do the same thing where the top is flat and the bottom is flat, but then the sides are all rounded. So if we press Control-R, like we did before, we can add a loop cut, and we'll bring this right up to the top. And then we'll do the same thing again, and we'll bring this right down to the bottom. I'm clicking, and then I move it down. And then, so this is become really so we don't want it to be that thick. So press A and press S and then X. Actually S and then Shift Z. So it only scales it on X and Y, but not the Z axis. And then we want to rotate this so that it's facing away from the door a little bit. So just R and then Y so that it's like this. And then this is the point where we would move this up to the door. So let's select this one and move it over for right now. We're just using that as a reference. And then if you right click this, you can shade auto smooth, so that it will smooth out so you can't see all the individual like creases or whatever. And then press G and Y, and we want to move this right to the door so we can actually see what it's going to look like on the door. And then G and X to move it over. Then R and Y to rotate it a little bit so it's not. And then if you go back into tab mode, we want to press Alt Z so we can get X-ray mode and just move this down so it's right at like the top of the door, and Alt Z to go back out of X-ray mode. So then we want to press go back into edit mode, press A, Shift D, and then X, and you can move it over, and then RZ 180 to flip the rotation. So the bottom of this is a little bit smaller than the top. So press Alt Z so you can get the X-ray mode and just scale down the bottom a little bit. And you should actually do that for both of these at the same time. And while you're doing it, it should pull them more towards the middle. If you don't want it to do that, you can press dot on your keyboard and choose individual origins, and then it will only scale like in the direction that it is, right? So this is looking pretty good. So this left one, if you press L over one of the points, it will select the entire object. So we just want to move this one a little bit more over so it's right at the edge. It should only just be covering the edge. And then we want it to be as far away from, like, as far over as it can be without seeing any of the wall. And then the last thing we want to do is put this log on the top of it. So press Shift A again and add another cube. And this spawned at the origin of the world. So just press G and Y to drag it back to your object. And then you can press G and Z and move it up. And then take the top vertices, G and Z, to move them down so it's squished. And then you can, let's just select the whole object. So press L over one of the points and press G and Z and move it up so that it's easier to pick the points. Alt Z to go into X-ray mode, G and X to move it over. And it's going to overhang the edge a little bit. So just slightly past this. And then we need to do the same thing with the edge loop. So go press Alt Z to get rid of the X-ray mode again. Press Control R to get this loop cut, and you can drag it over to each side the same way that we did before. And then this is obviously too long, like rectangular wise. So if you press L on it, like one of the vertices to select just this object, we'll press S and Y to crush it down. Then you can shade auto smooth again. So you have to do that in object mode, by the way. So press tab to go into object mode, right click, shade auto smooth, tab back into edit mode, then press G and Z to move it down, and then scale on the, so S and X to move it out a little bit. And yeah, so that's how I made this door shape. I think my top part is too far forward and it needs to be a little bit smaller. So press L on it, scale on the Y axis again. And we're going to add a loop cut at the back of it so the back part is flat. So press Control R on the side of it, just move this back, and then L again on this whole object to scale it on the Y axis to move it down, and then G and Y to move it forward. And then we want to just press L again and just, I think it just needs to be a little bit over this way so that it's centered. And then we just need it to actually move a little bit back more. So, no, still more. Like, it needs to be in front of the things, but it also needs to be in the wall so you can't see the back of it at all. Like, it's supposed to be like faceted to the wall. Is that even a word? I don't know if that's a word, faceted. Anyway, so this is how I made the door frame. So that's really awesome. So it's time for us to start naming our stuff. Okay, so this is going to be the top wall. This is the bottom wall. This is the right wall. And then this is going to be the left wall. And this is a door frame. So we also need to put like top door frame. Okay, so now we need to add the inside of the door. I'm going to go through this really quickly because this is already a really long video and we don't have enough time. I set the origin to, I set the 3D cursor to the center of the door before I added the cube. So you press Shift A to add a cube. You can move the 3D cursor by clicking this button and just clicking somewhere on the thing. When you add an object, it will go wherever the 3D cursor is. So if you just press G and Z, and G and Y. So we want to do the same thing where we subdivide this. So go to the add modifier on the left and just type in subdivision, and we're going to add the subdivision surface modifier. And then we want to change it to 3. We've been doing this for everything in the video so far. We want to change it to 3, tab, and then Control R to add a cut into this, and then bring this to the top, and then a cut again and bring it to the bottom, and then press A and S and S and Y to scale this in, and then S and X to move this closer together. Then you can press G and Z until it's at the bottom. Make sure it's like close to the door. G and X, G and Z, G and Y to just move it around until it's in the right spot. And then you can press Alt Z to get X-ray mode, and press G Z to move this down to the ground, and then G and Z to move this up to the top of the door. And then once you have this kind of good, you can right click and click Shade Auto Smooth. And this is going to be the inner part of the door. Now, this should be rotated at the same angle that the door is on, right? So if you press Alt Z again, select all these vertices on the thing, you can rotate them this way like this. Because you want kind of the same effect as the door, right? So like this will look better. And then again, G, just bring this out a little bit. So S and Y to scale this closer together. This needs to be pretty thin. And then G and Y and just bring it back to the front of the door. I think we need to rotate this on the, right click this object and set the origin to the geometry. Origin to geometry, yeah. And then we want to rotate this on the X axis so it's kind of leaning forward a little bit. And then G and then Y, just move it forward. Yeah, just like that. So it's kind of leaning forward and it's kind of like that. And then once you have it exactly perfect the way that you want to, in edit mode, you can press A to select everything, Shift D and then X to move it over, and then RZ 180, and then G and, oh shit, that rotates it this way. So then you need to press R and X to rotate this one because it's rotated wrongly. So they need to have the same X rotation. So just, you see that bottom point at the bottom, just make sure those two are lining up. Shit, this isn't going to work because we rotated the edges as well. So this whole edge is not rotated and this side edge is rotated. So let's go ahead and Shift D this again and just X to move it over. And then R Y 180. No, that's not going to work either. Let's just Control Z out of this so we're not duplicating. Oh, that's Alt Z. Control Z out of this so we're not duplicating this anymore. And let's add an edge loop here in the middle and just drag it over to the edge so it's flatter before we duplicate this. And then Shift D X and move it over. RZ 180 and then RX to move it forward, and then G and X to move it like that. And then this on the left needs to RX more until they're on the same angle. And there we go. So this is how I made the door. Again, this is like a really rushed version of it. I spent more time making my door for like the other scene that you've seen, but okay, so now we need to animate the door. So if you press Shift A on your keyboard, you can add a bone to your scene, and this bone should go like wherever your 3D cursor is. On the right, if you go to this data tab and you scroll down, there's an option for in front. This will make it so you can see the bone through all of your stuff. So then you can press RY90, and we actually want to do RY -90, and then G and X and G and Z, and we're just going to move this halfway through the door. Actually, we want to move this to the top of the door. We want to be able to animate both the top and the bottom of the door. So then we can press Shift D and then Z, and then G and Y to bring it a little bit closer because the front of the door is more towards us. And we don't want to duplicate this in object mode. So just Control Z out of that, press Tab, select everything, and then Shift D, Z, and move this down. You can select this point on the left and press G and Y and move it this way, and then G and Y and move it this way, and G and Y and G and Y. And we just want this to be actually close to the edges of the door. So G and Z to move it upwards, and then G and Y. This make sure it's just inside of this, the actual door itself. So the reason we have this side at this side is because we want to bring this towards this, and we want it to open that way. And then this could just be actually, so G and X to move this over, so it's only touching the edge. And and then G and X to move this over, and then we'll take these two, Shift D, Z 180, Enter, G. Where the hell did they go? Take these two bones, Shift D, X to move them over, RZ 180, enter GX to move them over. And this top one didn't move all the way over, so I don't know why it's doing that, but oh my god. Wait, oh no, this is object. This is edit mode. We're good. So GY, just move this one out a little bit. This doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to be using it to like animate the door. You can't see the bones when you're running the game or anything like that. It's probably better if they're perpendicular, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So after you're done setting this up in edit mode, you can tab back into object mode, select the door and the bones and go into pose mode, and then press A on everything and press Control P and then parent it with automatic weights. So this makes it so that you can control the door and you can scale the door. And when you scale, you see how it goes towards the wall, right? So we'll be scaling this. That's how we're going to be actually editing it. So then to make the animation, all you have to do is click on the animation tab. And then we want to create an animation out of this. So instead of using the dope sheet, we're going to use the action editor. We're going to click new and we'll just call this door open and press the, oh, I spelled that wrong. Door open, press the shield icon, and then we're going to make this 240 frames, so this is fine. Set the start frame to 0, set the end frame to 240. On the right side, there's like this little picture thing here. Change the frame rate to 240 FPS. Obviously, we're going to be making, our game is a stickman game, so obviously it's going to be 240 FPS. If you're making a video or something like that, you don't need to worry about making it 240 FPS. On YouTube and stuff like that, the maximum FPS is only 60. So keep that in mind, I guess. And basically, we just want to take this top bone and press S and X, and we're scaling it down to actually just make sure your cursor is not near the bone when you do it. So S and X to lock it on the X axis, and we're scaling it down until it's right close to the thing. And then actually press Control Z on that. You need to press A, select all the bones, press I, and then click location, rotation, and scale. This will put the first point to like your first frame, right? So then we want to change it to frame 60 or whatever frame they actually are all the way open at. So we're going to just put 240 in this case. Let's just do 120 actually. And we'll take this bone and we'll press SX and just scale it over until it's almost gone. And then SX and scale this one over. GX. No, we got to leave it the way it is. Let's press S0 on this bottom one. So now we have a problem where this needs to be actually touching the wall. So we can't have like a line here. It needs to be flush to this. So we need to get out of this completely. Go back to the layout tab and just go into this. You can click on the bone and just press H for right now. Press tab and go into edit mode. Press Control R on this and just move this over until it's almost flush with the wall. We need to do this on this one as well. And then just press Alt Z and just make sure that these are like right up against the thing so that when they scale, they don't, so that when they scale, they don't move, right? So G and X to move it over. Perfect. So then let's press Alt Z and we'll go back to the animation screen. Hopefully this didn't mess everything up. I don't know if the bones, I'll probably have to re-weight the bones. Let's just see what happens first though. So you can press Alt H to unhide the bones and go back to 0. Go to your door open animation, press A. Just change this to pose mode actually. So you got to select the bones and click pose. And AI to select location, rotation, and scale to make the first keyframe again. Change it to 120 in the frames and press S, X. And let's do something, because this bone is not all the way at the edge. So we're going to have to redo this. So let's go into this, right click on the bones and change clear. Do clear parent and do that on the object as well. So then in the bone thing, press tab, and this actually needs to be right over to the edge. And the same with this one, needs to be right at the very, very edge. This one needs to also be at the edge, and then this one needs to also be at the edge. So then we can go to object mode by pressing tab, press Control A, all transforms, and then you can go back into animation mode or whatever. or sorry, we have to parent this. So click on the bones, click on the thing, click back on the bones, go to pose mode, and press A, Control P, and then automatic weights. And then I think if we go back to animation, we should be able to press A to select all the bones, go back to the first frame, press I. Oh, we're in edit mode again. Let's go to pose mode. Press I, location, rotation, scale, go to 120. And then we just want to try this again. So, okay, we parented the bones to the actual entire frame. So we just need to right click this and click clear parent. And then we need to click on these, click on the door only, and then click the bones again, pose mode, A, Control P, automatic weights, then the animation tab, and then you can take the bone and you should be able to scale it down. So go back to 0, A again, press I to get the first frame and make sure that it's right. And then we can scale this down on the x-axis only until it's pretty much gone, and just make sure you start from further away so then it'll be easier to pull it to the right thing. And then this one we want to S0 so that it's completely gone. And then the same thing with this one, right? So SX until it's pretty much gone on this way. And then this one again, S0. So then you can press A, I, location, rotation, and scale. And if you press the space bar, you'll see that it will open. So this is having a problem where the bone is in the wrong spot. So we actually want the bone to be moved up more. So if we go into edit mode for the bone, we can press G and Z and just move it up, and then move this point down a little bit. And this point should be at the very top corner. And then this point should be in the top corner, and this point should be mirrored with the one across the way. And we might have to parent this again. Let's see if it works. Hang on. So we're in the door, open animation, select all the bones, press I to set the location, rotation, and scale. And you can see that these are going. So you can delete this keyframe on the right and just move to 120 again. Scale this down on the x-axis only. And then S0 on this. And just scale this down instead of S0. I don't really like it going into the wall, but anyway, so scale this one down the same way. SX, make sure you're only doing it in the x-axis. And then this one again can be S0. Okay, and then you can press A and then I, location, rotation, and scale. And then when you run this, the door opens. Okay, and we might want it to open a little bit faster than that. So you could just change it to the 60th frame, so it's like kind of like immediate. Okay, and the very, very last thing we're going to do in this video is behind the door, there needs to be a catch so that you have something to block this with. So just add another cube, and you can call this door black. Okay, and we can, at this point, you could turn on material preview if you want to. You don't have to, but we're just going to create a new material. We'll just call this black, and we're just going to make this black. And we would want to turn up the metallic to full and then turn up the roughness to full as well, so there's no shininess on it. Just put it into the door. And this, because behind the door, we don't want you to be able to see through the door. Oh my God, why is it rotating like this? And so then you can press G and Z and then scale it on the Z axis until it fully takes up the door. So when the door opens, you'll be able to see that there's like a back to it. So after you're done with the animation, all you have to do is save it. So inside of the pose mode, if you drag up another little, oh my God, I did that wrong. Shit. Close area. If you drag up a little thing from here, you can make this the NLA editor. And then all you have to do is click door open on this, and it will make an animation out of it. You don't have to do it for the cube one, so we can actually delete this cube one. And then inside of Unity, you can call this animation with a name, right? So that's how animations are made. This is a pretty long video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. The door is not perfect, okay? There's like a little waviness on the side of it, but you get the point, right? So you just need to mess with it until it's perfect the way that you want it to be. So you can use the concepts that we use to actually make the door. But like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And in the next video, we're not going to be putting this into Unity in this video, but in the next video, we're going to be taking this model that we've made, we're going to be putting it into Unity, and then at some point we're going to have to add a floor or something like that to it as well. But yeah.